Emily Hale never liked attention. She was the kind of person who blended into the background, always polite, always helpful, and always the first to say thank you, even when no one else did. But that morning, as she stood by the office elevator, quietly holding her lunch bag, she felt a sting in her chest that was getting harder to ignore each day. The whispering was louder than usual. She didn't need to turn around to know it was about her. The fake laughs, the not-so-subtle glances, the way someone accidentally bumped into her without apology, it had all become routine. It started small. An offhand comment about her clothes, a giggle when she mispronounced a client's name during a call, forgotten calendar invites, files missing from shared folders. Emily chalked it up to bad luck or clumsiness until it kept happening, again and again. Sapphire & Cody Communications had always prided itself on being modern and progressive. Glass walls, plants in every corner, free espresso and weekly yoga. But none of that meant anything when the culture underneath was rotten. She didn't tell Daniel, not at first. Her husband had his own world to deal with. Meetings, contracts, boardrooms full of powerful people. He had stepped away from daily operations, but he was still someone people answered to, someone they respected. And Emily had insisted when she took the job that no one know about their relationship. She wanted to be seen for her own merits, her own work, but lately it was getting harder to keep up the smile. That day, as she entered the break room, she found the small fridge unplugged. Her lunch, homemade chicken salad and apple slices, had spoiled. On top of the container was a sticky note that simply read, "Try not to stink today." She stood there for a moment frozen. Someone behind her snorted. "Oh no," a voice said sarcastically. "Did someone ruin Queen Hale's lunch again?" It was Mark. He always had that smirk on his face, like he knew exactly how far he could push without crossing any written rule. Emily didn't reply. She quietly threw her lunch away, washed her hands, and returned to her desk like nothing had happened. But something was different this time. Her hands trembled. And she hadn't even noticed until she spilled her water. Later that evening, as Daniel waited at the front window, he saw her car pull in. She didn't get out. 10 minutes passed, then 15. He stepped outside, walked up to the driver's side window, and gently tapped. Emily startled. Her eyes were red and her face was flushed. "Hey," he said softly, "dinner's ready." She forced a smile and nodded, but he could see the hurt behind it. And for the first time he realised, whatever was going on at that office, it wasn't small anymore. Dinner was quiet. Emily picked at her food, barely eating. Daniel didn't push. He just watched her, noticed how she avoided eye contact, how her shoulders seemed smaller than usual. After a while she excused herself, saying she had emails to catch up on. He let her go, but his heart wasn't at ease. Later that night, when she was asleep, Daniel walked into her home office. Her laptop was still open, a draft email glowing on the screen. He didn't read it, he respected her space, but the subject line said enough: concern about team behaviour. He closed the lid gently. The next morning, Emily left early. Daniel stood at the front window again, watching her pull out of the driveway like he always did. But this time, something in him tightened. He remembered how she flinched when he reached for her hand at dinner. Not from pain, more like exhaustion, the kind that sits deep in your bones. At Sapphire & Cody, things didn't get better. Shelby, one of the team leads, casually excluded Emily from a client presentation. When Emily asked why, she smiled and said, "We just figured you'd prefer to work behind the scenes. You're more quiet, right?" Emily felt her face burn. She wasn't a confrontational person. She never had been. But it was getting harder to swallow these things, harder to pretend they didn't hurt. That afternoon, she was called into a surprise feedback session. 3 people in a glass-walled room telling her she needed to be more collaborative, more social, and less sensitive to jokes. They said it all with smiles, as if they were doing her a favour. She nodded, thanked them, and walked out. But her hands were shaking again. That night, Daniel noticed the bruising on her wrist. He asked what happened. She hesitated, then mumbled, "Caught it on the cabinet." He didn't believe her, not entirely. So he made a decision. Daniel reached out to someone he trusted inside the company, a quiet but reliable department manager named Claire. She wasn't in Emily's direct chain of command, but she knew enough. "What's really happening in that office?" he asked, his voice calm but serious. Claire hesitated, then she said, "I think you already know." And that was it. No details, no accusations, just enough truth wrapped in silence. Daniel hung up and sat in the dark for a long time, his hands folded in front of him. He didn't want to embarrass Emily, didn't want to take over, but he also wasn't going to sit still anymore. Something had to change. And the next morning, Daniel Hale put on a suit, not the one for boardrooms, but the one he wore when he needed to be taken seriously. He picked up his keys and drove to Sapphire & Company. No appointment, no warning. He just showed up, and that was the beginning of the end. The lobby receptionist didn't recognise him at first. "Hi there," Daniel said with a warm smile. "I'm here to see Mr. Connors." She glanced at the schedule. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," Daniel replied simply, "but I believe he'll want to see me." Something about his calm tone made her hesitate. Then she asked for his name. When she heard it, her eyes widened slightly. "One moment, sir." Upstairs, news spread fast. By the time Daniel stepped off the elevator, half the management floor knew that Daniel Hale was in the building. Some panicked, others scrambled to clean up desks and act busy. Mr. Connors, the company's current CEO, greeted Daniel with an uneasy smile. "Mr. Hale, this is unexpected." Daniel nodded. "I know, I won't take much of your time." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. His presence alone shifted the energy in the room. A few employees passing by whispered to each other, unsure of why the man who helped build the company was suddenly here without notice. Meanwhile, Emily was sitting 2 floors below, completely unaware. She was typing up a client report, trying to ignore the chatter around her. Someone had just made a snide remark about her outfit, again, but she kept her head down. Daniel, however, was upstairs asking real questions. "How often do you check on internal culture?" he asked. "Do you monitor team dynamics, anonymous complaints, conflict resolution?" Mr. Connors cleared his throat. "We have procedures, yes, HR handles most of it." "Does HR know how to handle subtle bullying?" Daniel interrupted, voice still calm. "Do they recognise when someone's being isolated, disrespected, undermined over and over again, not with insults but with sarcasm, exclusion, humiliation masked as feedback?" There was a long pause. Daniel folded his hands. "I'm not here to micromanage," he continued, "but I've seen someone I love come home looking smaller and sadder each night. That's not a policy issue, that's a people issue. And I need to know what kind of people are running your teams." Mr. Connors shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable. Downstairs, Mark had just accidentally spilled coffee near Emily's desk again. "Oops," he said, grinning. "Better move that file." Emily gave him a tired look, but before she could respond, the floor's group chat pinged. A message popped up. "Heads up, Daniel Hale is in the building." Emily froze. Her hands went cold. She hadn't told him. She never planned to. The fact that he was here meant he knew, or at least suspected enough. Just then she heard footsteps approaching. Emily didn't move. She stared at the message on her screen, her heart thudding in her chest. She felt exposed, almost like someone had opened a door she meant to keep locked. She didn't even hear her name the first time. "Emily?" She turned around slowly. Claire stood by her desk, kind, steady Claire from finance, the only one who ever smiled at her without pretending. Her expression was gentle, but there was something behind her eyes. "He's upstairs," Claire said quietly, "with Connors." Emily felt her stomach turn. "I didn't call him," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know," Claire replied, "but maybe he just couldn't watch you walk in like this anymore." Emily swallowed hard. The entire floor was unusually quiet. People were still whispering, but it was more nervous now, curious. Even Mark had backed off and taken a sudden suspicious interest in his inbox. Emily stood up. She didn't run, but she moved with purpose. She walked to the elevator, her mind racing. She wasn't sure what she was going to say, or if she wanted to say anything at all, but she needed to see him. When the elevator doors opened, Daniel was already walking out of the conference room. He looked calm, composed, but there was something sharper in his eyes, something protective. He spotted her immediately. "Emily," he said softly. She felt a dozen eyes on her. She hated that. She looked up at him, and for a moment, she wasn't in an office. She wasn't surrounded by co-workers or fluorescent lights. She was just tired, and standing in front of the only person who saw her for who she really was. "I didn't ask you to come," she said quietly. "I know," he replied, "but I came anyway." There was no apology in his voice, no arrogance either, just quiet certainty. "I talked to Connors," he continued, and HR is already involved. I didn't name names yet, but I made it clear something's wrong here, and it ends today." Emily looked down. "This is going to cause a storm," she whispered. Daniel took a step closer, lowering his voice. "Then let it storm." He didn't touch her, he didn't make a scene, he just stood there, a quiet force of nature, holding the line she had grown too tired to hold on her own. Behind her, someone coughed nervously. The whispers had started again. Emily closed her eyes for a second. When she opened them, she nodded. "Okay," she said. And together they walked out of that office, past the stairs, past the silence, past the people who never cared enough to ask if she was okay. The office didn't go back to normal after that. People acted like it did, of course, pretended to type, held fake phone calls, kept their heads down. But there was a tension in the air now, like everyone was holding their breath. Because something had shifted. Daniel and Emily didn't speak much on the way home. She sat quietly, looking out the window, while he drove with both hands on the wheel. The silence wasn't awkward, it was full. Like both of them were sorting through pieces of a puzzle they hadn't realised they were building together. When they got home, she finally said it. "I didn't want you to fix it." Daniel didn't look surprised. "I know. I just wanted to survive it quietly, without anyone noticing." He nodded slowly. "But you shouldn't have to survive your workplace." She blinked hard. That sentence hit deeper than she expected. Over the next 48 hours, things moved fast. HR launched a formal inquiry. Claire had quietly submitted supporting documentation, emails, messages, and a private statement about what she'd witnessed over the past 6 months. Another woman from the design team, Jenna, came forward too, and then another. None of them had spoken before, but somehow, seeing Emily walk out beside Daniel made them realise they weren't crazy, or alone. At the centre of it all, Mark, Shelby, and a few others who had built a toxic little kingdom out of sarcasm and status. The group chat messages were the final nail. Screenshots revealed jokes about quiet Emily, mocking her handwriting, her lunch, even the way she walked. There were polls about who could get under her skin the fastest. Someone had even edited a photo of her standing alone at the holiday party, adding the caption, "Queen Hail in Exile." Daniel never saw the screenshots himself, he didn't need to. But when Emily did, she sat very still. She didn't cry, she didn't speak. She just closed the folder and pushed it away. Meanwhile, HR held one-on-one meetings. Mark tried to play dumb. Shelby blamed the team dynamic. Another tried to say it was all just office banter. But the leadership wasn't buying it anymore. Daniel hadn't made any threats, he hadn't demanded punishment. He'd simply asked the company he helped build, "Is this who we are now?" And that question stuck. On the third day, Connors called Emily. "We'd like to meet with you," he said, "privately, to talk about your experience. You don't have to agree, but we'd be grateful if you would." Emily looked at Daniel across the kitchen table. He didn't say a word, just waited. She took a slow breath. "Okay," she replied, "but I'm bringing someone with me." The meeting was held in a small conference room tucked into the corner of the executive floor. It wasn't the kind of place Emily had ever been invited to before. The chairs were more comfortable, the coffee actually smelled good, and the windows let in real sunlight. It felt like a different world from the one she had worked in every day. Daniel didn't sit beside her. He stood by the door, quiet, like a shadow in the corner, there if she needed him, but letting her lead. Across the table were Mr. Connors, 2 HR representatives, and a woman from legal who introduced herself as "just here to observe." Emily folded her hands. She wasn't nervous, she was tired. Connors spoke first. "Emily, thank you for agreeing to meet with us. I want to start by saying I'm sorry for everything you experienced here. We've failed you." Emily nodded once but said nothing. "We've reviewed the evidence, the group chats, the emails, the feedback logs. What you went through wasn't just unprofessional, it was harmful. And we understand why you chose not to speak up sooner." She looked up then. "No," she said softly. "I didn't speak up because I thought it would make things worse." There was a pause. "I didn't want people to think I was playing the victim or using my husband's name. I just wanted to work, to be respected like anyone else. But every time I stayed quiet, it told them I would keep letting it happen." Her voice didn't shake, she wasn't angry, just matter of fact. "I tried to be invisible, and they punished me for it." No one said a word. "I'm not here to demand anything," she continued. "I'm not suing you, I'm not asking for money, but I hope you understand this isn't just about me." She took a breath. "It's about the other women who left quietly. The interns who never came back after 3 weeks. The ones who were told they were too sensitive or not a good culture fit. You lost good people, and you never asked why. The woman from legal looked down at her notepad. One of the HR reps nodded slowly, as if something finally clicked. Mr. Connors cleared his throat. We want to offer a formal apology, in writing, and we'd also like to invite you to help us rebuild. Consult on a new workplace culture program on your terms. Emily looked at him carefully. That's a generous offer, she said, but I won't be returning. Connors blinked. We understand. I'm not angry, she added, just ready to do something that feels honest. And with that, she stood up. Daniel stepped forward to meet her but didn't speak. He just walked beside her quietly as they left the room. As they exited the building, Emily paused by the glass doors. She turned around and looked back, not with bitterness, but with clarity. For the first time in months, she didn't feel small. She felt seen. Emily didn't quit in a blaze of glory. There were no emails sent to all staff, no dramatic speeches, no boxes packed in a flurry of rage. She sent a simple message to HR thanking them for the conversation and confirming her departure date. She wrapped up her remaining work. She handed off her accounts. She even left behind a detailed handover document, because that's just the kind of person she was. On her last day, no one threw her a goodbye party, but Claire brought her a coffee, and Jenna slipped her a handwritten note that just said, "Thank you for speaking when I couldn't." Emily kept that note. She didn't walk out of that office with anger. She walked out with her head high, her bag over her shoulder, and her future wide open. A week later, she sat at the kitchen table, a stack of job offers unopened beside her. Daniel was making breakfast. He insisted on doing it every morning now, like it was a small way to give her back time she had lost. "You don't have to rush," he said, flipping pancakes. "I know," Emily replied, "but I've been thinking about something." She slid a notebook across the table. Inside were rough sketches, scribbled ideas, names crossed out and circled again. At the top of the page, in big letters, were the words, "Field and Light, Creative Solutions for Small Businesses." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "This yours?" "I want to start something small," she said. "Just me, maybe 1 or 2 people. Help local shops and non-profits with branding, messaging, design, stuff I'm actually good at. No glass walls, no office gossip, just real work that matters." He smiled. "I think it sounds perfect." It wasn't instant, it wasn't easy, but slowly things began to build. Emily rented a tiny studio space above a bookstore. She bought second-hand furniture and painted the walls herself. Her first client was a bakery run by a retired schoolteacher. The next, a mental health non-profit in need of a rebrand. Then a bookstore, a yoga studio, a small coffee roaster in Oregon. Word travelled, but it wasn't just clients who reached out. It was former co-workers, not the ones who had mocked her, but the quiet ones, the ones who had stayed silent or left the company years ago without ever saying why. They sent messages like, "I wish I'd spoken up too. You made me feel braver. Do you think you're hiring?" Emily didn't respond to all of them, but she read every word. One day, Claire stopped by the studio. She didn't ask for a job. She just sat on the old couch by the window and said, "You know, the office hasn't been the same without you." Emily looked up from her laptop. Claire smiled. "I mean that in a good way." Then she added, "People are finally paying attention." Emily didn't say much in return. She just poured them both a cup of tea, handed Claire a mug, and leaned back in her chair, content, steady, and finally free. Months passed. Autumn came, and with it, the soft chill that made people crave warm drinks and slower mornings. Emily's little studio above the bookstore smelled like cinnamon and old paper. Her calendar was full, not overwhelming, but full in the best kind of way. She never missed the old office, but every now and then pieces of it found their way back to her. Claire would text updates every so often, not gossip, just quiet truths. Mark had been let go. Officially, it was a mutual separation, but everyone knew why. Shelby was transferred to another branch, her team quietly dissolved. HR rolled out new training programs, created a task force on workplace culture, and made sure anonymous feedback actually stayed anonymous this time. It wasn't a total overhaul, but it was a start, and Emily's name was never mentioned. That was exactly how she wanted it. One Saturday morning, she walked into her favourite cafe and saw Jenna sitting by the window, laptop open, a mess of highlighters scattered across her table. "Working on something big?" Emily asked, smiling. Jenna looked up, surprised and delighted. "Emily, hey, yeah, kind of. I'm applying for a grant. I'm thinking about launching a design collective for women in creative fields who've left toxic jobs. Emily raised her eyebrows. That sounds familiar. Jenna laughed. Wonder where I got the idea. They talked for over an hour about dreams, healing, boundaries, and how long it takes to really feel okay again. When Emily left, she felt something settle inside her. A kind of peace that didn't need permission anymore. Later that evening, she sat on the back porch with Daniel, a blanket over their legs, the sky slowly shifting from pink to deep blue. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't come to the office that day? She asked softly. Daniel looked at her, thoughtful. I think about it all the time, he said, and I'm still not sure if I came too late or just in time. Emily leaned her head on his shoulder. I'm glad you came, she whispered. He didn't say anything back, he didn't need to. The wind rustled through the trees. Somewhere down the block, a neighbour's dog barked once and then went quiet. And in that stillness there was no grand ending, no triumphant finale, just the gentle truth that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is walk away from the fire and choose to rebuild. Emily didn't set out to inspire anyone. She wasn't trying to make a point or prove anything. She just wanted peace. Something steady, something real. But sometimes doing the quiet thing ends up speaking the loudest. One morning she opened her inbox and found a message from someone she hadn't heard from in years. Subject, you probably don't remember me. The name rang a faint bell. Amber, a former intern from way back, long before the worst of the office toxicity had set in. Emily clicked the message. Hi Emily, you might not remember me, but I interned with you for a few months. I was young, nervous, and didn't talk much, but you were kind. You listened when I had questions, even when no one else did. I saw what you went through. I didn't understand all of it back then, but I knew enough to feel sick about it. I never said anything. I didn't know how. But I want you to know, I've just started a full-time job in branding, and I'm building the kind of team I wish we'd had. And a lot of that is because of you. Thank you. Really. Emily read it twice. Then she just sat there, staring at her screen, hands still. It was such a simple message, no big gestures, no dramatic closure. But it mattered. That afternoon, she went for a walk around the neighbourhood. The air was cool, leaves crunching underfoot. Kids played in someone's front yard, a dog barked at a squirrel, and someone across the street was burning a cinnamon-scented candle that drifted into the breeze. She wasn't thinking about work. She wasn't thinking about what had happened, or what didn't. She was just here, present. And when she came home, Daniel was in the backyard planting herbs in the little raised bed they'd been building together. He looked up and smiled. Hey, I saved you a spot for Rosemary. Emily laughed softly. That's exactly what I was hoping for. She knelt beside him, digging her hands into the dirt, the cool soil grounding and soft. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Daniel asked, almost offhand, Do you miss it? The office? The old rhythm? Emily thought for a moment. I miss who I thought I could be there, she said, but I like who I'm becoming now more. Daniel didn't say anything. He just reached over and gently squeezed her hand. And in the golden light of that late afternoon, with Rosemary between her fingers and peace blooming slowly in the garden of her life, Emily finally felt it. Not just relief, but restoration. She wasn't escaping anymore. She was building something better. The funny thing was, Emily never planned to look back. She had moved on. She had built something new, small, simple, and honest. Her days were no longer filled with meetings that drained her or smiles that weren't real. She worked with people she respected, she slept better, she laughed more. And still one morning an envelope arrived in the mail. No return address, just her name, handwritten, a little crooked. Inside was a single sheet of paper, no letterhead, no signature. It said, You didn't destroy us, we destroyed ourselves. And somehow you still walked away with grace. I hope you know that made more of a difference than you think. Emily sat with that paper for a long time. She didn't know who had sent it. Maybe it was Jenna, maybe Claire, maybe one of the people who had once looked the other way. It didn't matter. It wasn't about regret. It was about recognition. Later that evening, she tucked the note into a folder where she kept other things that mattered. Jenna's thank you, Amber's email, her first logo sketch for Field and Light. She wasn't collecting proof, just reminders of what she'd survived and what she'd chosen instead. That night, she and Daniel had friends over for dinner. Nothing fancy, just pasta and wine and laughter that filled the corners of their home. Someone asked her, halfway through the meal, Do you ever miss the corporate world? Emily smiled, wiped her hands on a dish towel and said, Not once. But later, when everyone had gone and the dishes were done, she stood at the kitchen window, looking out at the moonlight on their little backyard garden. And she whispered, almost to herself, "I'm proud of the way I left." Not because it was loud, but because it was true. Sometimes the strongest thing we can do is walk away with our dignity intact. Not to win, not to prove a point, but simply to protect our peace. And sometimes that quiet choice inspires others more than any loud fight ever could. If this story made you feel something, you're not alone. Maybe you've been Emily, maybe you've been Daniel, or maybe you were the quiet friend who wished they had spoken up. Wherever you are in your journey, I hope this story reminded you that kindness, integrity, and quiet courage still matter. Thank you for staying with us until the end. If you felt moved, please consider giving this video a like, subscribing to Rain Inside, and sharing your thoughts in the comments. We read every word and your voice matters. Take care, and we'll see you in the next story.